This woman looked like anyone you'd pass on the street, harmless, even kind. But nothing about her story stayed normal for long. In 2006, Tiffany Hall rushed to the hospital, claiming she'd suffered a tragic premature birth. But there was one glaring issue. She wasn't pregnant at all. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a chilling truth. A young, pregnant woman with her 3 children had gone missing. The further they went, the darker the story became. By the end of this video, you'll be left questioning, what could drive someone to commit such unthinkable acts? For this case, let's rewind to the year 2006, when East St. Louis, Illinois, was a city grappling with deep-rooted problems: poverty, a struggling economy, high crime rates, and decaying neighborhoods. Just across the mighty Mississippi River from St. Louis, Missouri, East St. Louis had long been plagued by unemployment and urban decay, leaving much of its population living in harsh, unforgiving conditions. Despite the overwhelming challenges surrounding them, 2 young women, Tiffany Hall and Jamela Tunstall, grew up in this gritty environment, forming a bond that would be tested in ways no one could have predicted. Though they weren't sisters by blood, they often referred to each other as such, growing up side by side in a place where friendship was a rare, precious gift. Now, Jamela's life hadn't been easy. From a young age, she bounced between foster homes, trying to maintain a sense of stability and stay focused on her education. But the constant uprooting, the feelings of abandonment, and the harsh realities of her world made it difficult for her to trust others. Then, she met Tiffany. Tiffany understood Jamela in a way no one else could. They shared a bond forged in the struggles of their childhood, and it was clear to anyone who knew them that they had found in each other a sense of family and belonging. Tiffany, on the other hand, was no stranger to trouble. By the time she was 14, she had already earned a reputation as a juvenile delinquent, having run-ins with the law and constantly clashing with her strict mother. Tiffany's rebellious nature was legendary. She even set their kitchen on fire as a teenager, a story her mother, Beverly Cruz, recounted to the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Yet, despite all of this, Tiffany and Jamela's friendship remained steadfast, offering them a sense of family in a world that often felt unforgiving. And like so many young women from tough neighborhoods, both Tiffany and Jamela found themselves mothers before they were even fully adults. At the age of 16, Jamela gave birth to her first child, Demond, in 1999. Over the next few years, she had 2 more children, Ivan in 2003 and Janella in 2004. But motherhood wasn't without its challenges. Jamela lost custody of her children at one point, due to a controversial discipline incident, but she fought hard to get them back. After taking parenting classes, she was granted custody once more, and even enrolled in community college, dreaming of a future where she could become a photographer and provide her kids with a better life. Tiffany's journey into motherhood was just as tumultuous. Also becoming a mother at 16, Tiffany had 2 daughters of her own. However, her story took a darker turn in 1999, when she lost custody of her children due to horrific evidence of abuse against her 2-month-old baby. Witnesses reported seeing the infant in Tiffany's arms, limp and unresponsive, which sparked an investigation. The heartbreaking abuse left lasting consequences, and by the time her daughter turned 7, she still relied on diapers and had difficulty speaking, a painful reminder of what had happened. In 2002, Tiffany's daughters were returned to her care after the state attorney decided not to pursue charges. The Department of Children and Family Services concluded that Tiffany was no longer a threat, giving her a second chance at motherhood. But the respite was short-lived. By the time Tiffany was 23, she found herself in more legal trouble, this time charged with possession of a stolen credit card. Meanwhile, Jamela, though facing her own challenges, had carved out a quieter, more stable life for herself and her children. In the midst of all this, their friendship remained constant. Tiffany often babysat Jamela's children, even while struggling to manage her own family. It seemed like life had its ups and downs for both women, but they were still fighting to make the best of their circumstances. However, everything changed on the evening of September 16, 2006. Tiffany Hall made a startling call to the police, claiming she had just given birth to a stillborn child at Frank Holton Park. When Tiffany Hall arrived at the hospital on that fateful day, what began as a medical emergency soon spiraled into something much darker. She refused to allow doctors to examine her, which immediately raised concerns. As investigators began to question her, her responses grew increasingly erratic and contradictory. She fluctuated between claiming she had been SA'd and insisting that was not the case at all. Each statement she made seemed to lead nowhere, leaving the medical staff and investigators uneasy. No one knew that Tiffany was pregnant. No one except her boyfriend, Keith Horn, who was serving in the Navy. The truth of her pregnancy remained a secret, hidden behind the walls of her deception. After an autopsy was performed on the baby girl, the cause of death remained unclear. No signs of trauma were found, and doctors couldn't pinpoint what had happened. Tiffany's lifeless infant was taken to the morgue, and the answers everyone so desperately sought seemed just out of reach. However, the situation took an even stranger turn when Tiffany decided to hold a funeral for the baby she named Tiffany Horn. Just days after making dramatic claims of stillbirth, she arranged the service. But everything about the event felt off. The funeral director was puzzled by Tiffany's strange behavior. Minutes before the ceremony was supposed to begin, Tiffany made an unusual request. She asked if they could move the funeral to another day so more family members could attend. This raised immediate suspicion, especially when only 2 family members showed up. Given the circumstances, it seemed odd that more of her loved ones wouldn't be there to mourn the loss of a child. To make things even more bizarre, Tiffany showed up 2 hours late to her own baby's funeral. Funerals are typically somber occasions, and it's expected for people to arrive on time to pay their respects, especially the mother. But Tiffany's tardiness raised even more questions about her involvement in the tragic events unfolding. Among the few who attended the funeral was her boyfriend, Keith Horn. He had flown back from the Navy specifically for this service, believing the baby buried that day was his daughter. Keith's presence at the service was a testament to the confusion surrounding Tiffany's story, as he was unaware of the darkness lurking behind her actions. Meanwhile, there was growing concern about Jamela Tunstall, Tiffany's best friend. Jamela had gone missing, and no one seemed to know where she was. Her friends and family were increasingly anxious as the hours passed without word from her. Calls and messages went unanswered, and Jamela seemed to have disappeared without a trace. The uncertainty weighed heavily on everyone who cared about her, but it wasn't until after the funeral that a chilling conversation would change everything. Tiffany casually spoke to Keith, and in a moment that would haunt him forever, she told him that she had taken Jamela's life in a brutal attempt to steal the baby. Keith's mind raced as he tried to process what Tiffany had just said. At that moment, Keith knew he couldn't stay silent. He had to act. Without a second thought, he picked up his phone and called the police, his hands trembling as he tried to make sense of what Tiffany had just told him. Deep down, he hoped it wasn't true, but he couldn't take any chances. Someone had to find Jamela. Police responded immediately, launching an urgent search for Jamela, who had been missing for nearly a week. Their investigation led them to a vacant lot behind Tiffany's home. What they discovered there shocked even the most seasoned officers. Jamela's lifeless body, hidden among the tall grass. Not far from her was a chilling piece of evidence, a pair of scissors that raised more questions than answers. Tiffany was taken into custody that same night. As investigators questioned her, the truth began to unfold, bit by bit, each detail more disturbing than the last. Tiffany admitted that she had been with Jamela earlier that week at her mother's house in Belleville. What was supposed to be a casual visit between friends took a tragic and violent turn. According to Tiffany's confession, she had launched a sudden attack on Jamela, leaving her badly injured and unable to fight back. Jamela had briefly regained consciousness and tried to escape, but Tiffany restrained her once again. She then moved Jamela into the bathroom, and what happened next would change everything. In a calculated move, Tiffany attempted to remove the baby from Jamela, who was 7 months pregnant at the time. Sadly, Jamela did not survive. It was later revealed that Tiffany had been planning this act in advance. In the days leading up to the incident, she had purchased items typically used during home births: alcohol, a bulb syringe, and scissors. All of this was done under the illusion that she herself had been expecting a child. Her motive? To convince her Navy boyfriend, Keith, that they had a child together, in hopes of strengthening their relationship. The entire plan had been built on lies, and the consequences were devastating. Now just imagine. What if you were there when this all happened? Not hearing about it in a documentary years later, but living in that exact moment. The news breaking, the rumors spreading, the whispers turning into gasps. A best friend gone. Her kids are missing. And the person accused? The very one who was once like a sister to her. How would you react to something this outrageous? To know someone could take 5 innocent lives, not for money, not for revenge, not even in a fit of rage, but simply to maintain a lie, to manipulate a man into staying. It's one of those moments where reality feels stranger than fiction. And I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Drop them in the comments. If this case hit you like it hit us, let's talk about it. Jamela's death had already left her loved ones devastated. A young mother with a baby on the way, gone in an instant. But the heartbreak didn't end there. Her 3 children were still missing, and the silence surrounding their whereabouts grew heavier with each passing hour. Panic turned into dread, and dread into full-blown fear. Then came Friday, September 22nd. Police, determined to uncover the truth, returned to Jamela's apartment to continue their search. They spoke again with Ivan Collins, Jamela's partner. That's when they learned a detail that made their blood run cold. He hadn't seen the kids since Monday, the 18th. And the last person they were with? Tiffany Hall. That simple detail changed everything. Investigators knew they were running out of time. Meanwhile, Tiffany was still in custody, and under pressure, she finally broke. She confessed, but what she said didn't bring relief. It only deepened the horror. Following her directions, police returned to the apartment early the next morning. The moment they stepped inside, something felt off. A smell lingered in the air, strong, foul, and unmistakable. Officers braced themselves. Then they found what no one wanted to believe. Inside the laundry area, hidden from sight, were the bodies of Jamela's 3 children. The very place where life should feel routine and safe had become the scene of something unspeakable. They had been there for 5 days. 5 entire days. And the most chilling part? Police had been inside that apartment earlier and never realized what was just feet away. The discovery hit like a punch to the gut. Tiffany's actions left the entire city in shock. What began as a lie to cover up her deception spiraled into a tragedy that took 5 innocent lives. The community, the families, and even the investigators were all left shaken by the scale of what had occurred. And dare we say, this is one of the worst crimes we've ever researched. Not just because of the sheer magnitude of the crime, but because of the shallow, senseless reason behind it. 5 lives lost, all in an attempt to manipulate and convince a boyfriend. Now let's take a closer look at Tiffany Hall's side of the story, the part on how she carried out the crime without a single soul noticing for days. It's chilling to imagine, but for nearly a full week, no one knew the truth behind Tiffany's carefully woven lies. By the time people began asking questions, it was already too late. On September 18th, just 3 days before the funeral for the infant Tiffany claimed was her own, a baby she insisted had been stillborn, she was already concealing the horrific truth. That same day, September 18th, Tiffany continued her manipulation by approaching Jamela Tunstall's partner, Ivan Collins. She told him that Jamela had asked her to pick up the kids and use her car. Because Tiffany had once been close to the family and had even babysat the children before, no one thought to question her. With this lie, Tiffany took 7-year-old Demond, 2-year-old Ivan, and 10-month-old Janella, Jamela's 3 young children, back to the very place where their mother had recently gone missing. What happened next remains one of the most devastating turns in the case. Once back at Jamela's apartment in the John DeShields housing complex, Tiffany told the children it was time for a bath, something so routine it wouldn't raise any alarm. What followed was a tragedy that would go undiscovered for days. Though the details remained sealed to protect the dignity of the victims, reports later suggested that Tiffany may have sedated the children with cough syrup before ending their lives one by one. Afterward, she placed their bodies in the apartment's laundry area, 2 in the washing machine, 1 in the dryer, closing the doors and walking away as if nothing had happened. She kept silent, and unbelievably, no one knew what she had done for nearly 5 days. By then, Tiffany had not only taken the life of her best friend, but also her unborn baby, and now her 3 young children. Yet, she never gave a clear explanation for why she did it. She offered no motive, no justification, just silence. And that silence left behind endless questions. Why would someone harm their own best friend and her children? Was Tiffany experiencing a mental breakdown? Was she ever actually pregnant? Or was that too part of the lie? Could this all have been driven by something deeper, something darker? These were the questions people asked as the truth began to unfold. Jamela's funeral, which included her 3 children and her unborn daughter, was held on September 29, 2006. Over 700 people showed up to mourn and remember. Friends shared stories of Jamela's bright, youthful spirit. They talked about how she adored her kids, how her face lit up whenever she spoke about them, and how she had dreams of building a better life for her family. Even the children were remembered for the little things, like how one of them loved sharing a green toy tractor with the neighborhood kids, and how they would always smile when Jamela watched them play. The community rallied around the family. In just 3 days, they raised more than $30,000 to help with funeral expenses. Meanwhile, the case against Tiffany Hall was growing stronger by the day. At first, she was charged with the deaths of Jamela and her unborn baby. But once investigators learned the truth about the children, 3 more charges were added. Tiffany initially pleaded not guilty, which led to a court-ordered psychiatric evaluation. She began with a public defender, but once the prosecution announced its intent to seek the death penalty, she was assigned a more experienced defense attorney. Her legal team shared that Tiffany had a long history of mental health challenges. She reportedly scored in the mid-70s on an IQ test, which suggested borderline intellectual functioning. More evaluations revealed that she had been struggling mentally for years, dating all the way back to childhood. What made this case even harder to comprehend was the fact that Tiffany had children of her own, 2 daughters, ages 7 and 8 at the time of the crime. This detail left many wondering, how could someone who knew the experience of motherhood turn around and do something so devastating? On June 10, 2008, Tiffany Hall changed her plea to guilty. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For many, it seemed justice had finally been served, but even after her sentencing, Tiffany wasn't finished with the legal system. In September of that same year, she tried to withdraw her guilty plea, claiming her lawyer had not adequately defended her. The court rejected her request. Then, in 2012, she filed another petition arguing that her attorneys failed to investigate her mental health properly. According to her claim, one of the reports evaluating her mental state hadn't even been received until 2 days after she had already entered her plea. This second report, which evaluated whether she had been sane at the time of the crime, described a history of serious mental health diagnoses: psychotic disorder, bipolar disorder, post-traumatic stress, and schizophrenia. Records from psychiatric hospitals were included, dating back to her teenage years. Because of these issues, the court decided to reverse the denial of her post-conviction petition, meaning Tiffany could continue her fight for appeal. Her legal team revised and resubmitted the petition throughout 2015 and 2016. Multiple extensions were granted, and Tiffany even requested a new attorney, which was denied. Eventually, her petition was dismissed for not meeting the court's technical standards. Still, Tiffany appealed again, arguing that her lawyer didn't properly fix the petition. In 2020, she won that appeal, giving her another opportunity to have the case reviewed. As of now, Tiffany Hall's case is still in the appeals process. While it's unclear how long this will continue, Jamela's family finds some comfort in knowing that Tiffany is behind bars, serving life without parole. Tiffany, now 43 years old, is housed at Logan Correctional Center in Lincoln, Illinois. As for the baby whose funeral was held back on September 21st, that child was later exhumed and reburied alongside Jamela and her 3 siblings in Millstadt, Illinois, bringing the family back together in eternal rest. What makes this case unforgettable isn't just how it happened, it's why. The motive remains as hollow as the lives it destroyed. And while Tiffany may spend the rest of her life in prison, the wounds she left behind will never truly heal. So now we ask you, do you believe life in prison is enough for someone who committed such acts? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you've made it this far, be sure to check out this next video. I think you'll enjoy it. Thank you once again for watching.